The phone rang on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the silence of my Phoenix kitchen like a blade. "Ma'am, this is St. Mary's Hospital Billing Department. The delivery bill for baby Thompson is short $12,000. The insurance only covered 60%, and the family cannot pay the remainder." My hand trembled as I gripped the receiver, memories flooding back of being thrown out just 2 days ago by my son Marcus and daughter-in-law Jennifer. They called me unwanted, unnecessary, told me I wasn't family. Now they needed my money. I took a deep breath, surprising myself with the calm that settled over me as I prepared to say words that would change everything forever. Just 3 days earlier, I had been driving through the Colorado mountains with pure joy filling my heart. 10 hours from Phoenix to Denver, singing along to the radio, stopping only for gas and coffee. My first grandchild was coming, and nothing could dampen my excitement. I had taken 2 weeks off from my real estate business, something I never did, but this was special. This was family. The baby gifts filled my entire back seat. A handmade quilt from the local artisan shop, organic cotton onesies, wooden toys crafted by a neighbor who specialized in heirloom pieces. I had even bought a rocking chair, planning to assemble it in their nursery, imagining myself holding my grandson while singing the same lullabies I used to sing to Marcus. University Hospital looked imposing against the Denver skyline, all glass and steel, reaching toward the clouds. I found parking after circling the garage twice, my stomach fluttering with grandmother nerves. The maternity ward smelled like antiseptic and hope, filled with the sounds of new life beginning. Marcus appeared in the hallway, wearing scrubs that seemed too big for his frame. My son looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usually perfect hair disheveled. When he saw me, something flickered across his face that I couldn't quite read. "Mom, what are you doing here?" The question hit me like cold water. "Marcus, honey, you called me 3 days ago. You said Jennifer was in labor and I should come. I drove all night to get here." He glanced toward the delivery room, then back at me, his jaw tightening. "Listen, Mom, Jennifer wants only her family here. Her mom and sister are already in the room, and the nurses said no more visitors." I felt my smile faltering. "But Marcus, I'm family too. I'm your mother, and this is my first grandchild." "Don't push it," he said softly. But his words carried a sharp edge. "She never wanted you here anyway." The hallway seemed to tilt around me. Nurses walked past, wheeling equipment, their shoes squeaking on the polished floors. Somewhere behind Marcus, I could hear Jennifer's mother talking loudly about decorating the nursery, making plans I would never be part of. From the doorway of the delivery room, Jennifer appeared, her face flushed from labor, but her eyes cold when they met mine. She whispered something to Marcus, and he nodded. "Mom, you should go." I wanted to fight, to demand my place as grandmother, to remind him of every sacrifice I had made raising him alone. Instead, I simply nodded. "Call me when the baby arrives." Walking back through those hospital corridors felt like the longest journey of my life. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, crying until my eyes burned. Then I drove to the nearest hotel, a modest place 3 blocks from the hospital, and checked in for what I thought would be a celebration weekend. That evening, I called my best friend Patricia back in Phoenix. Her voice was warm and familiar, but when I told her what happened, she grew quiet. "Gabriella, I need to tell you something. Jennifer has been saying things about you around town. At the grocery store last month, she told Mrs. Henderson that you were controlling and manipulative, that you tried to take over their wedding planning." My heart sank further. "Patricia, I helped with the flowers because she asked me to. I paid for the photographer because I wanted to. I know, honey, but she's been painting a different picture. Some of the other real estate agents mentioned hearing similar stories at the coffee shop. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction with Jennifer, searching for signs I had missed. Had I overstepped? Had my enthusiasm been mistaken for interference? Unable to rest, I opened my laptop and did something I had never done before. I searched for Jennifer's social media profiles. What I found made my stomach turn. Post after post about her toxic mother-in-law who tried to ruin our wedding. Photos of her bridal shower with captions about finally having a real family who supports me. Pictures of Marcus looking uncomfortable while she described me as someone who never learned boundaries. The laptop screen glowed in the dark hotel room as I realized how thoroughly she had poisoned our relationship. Every kind gesture I had made, every attempt to welcome her into our family, had been twisted into evidence of my supposed toxicity. The lies had been building for months, maybe years, creating a wall between Marcus and me that I never even knew existed. Sleep eluded me that first night in Denver. By sunrise, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, beyond just the family drama. Marcus had seemed nervous, not just tired. There was desperation in his eyes that I recognized from his childhood, when he would try to hide broken toys or bad grades. I knew people in Denver from my real estate business. Colorado had been one of my expansion markets 5 years ago, and I still maintained connections with agents and brokers throughout the state. While drinking coffee in the hotel lobby, I made some calls. "Sarah, it's Gabriella Thompson from Desert Bloom Real Estate. I need a favor. Can you run a property search for my son Marcus Thompson and his wife Jennifer?" Sarah Chen, one of the most thorough agents I knew, called me back within an hour. "Gabriella, I found some information, but it's not good news. Marcus lost his engineering position at Morrison Construction 6 months ago. Public records show he's currently employed as a maintenance worker at University Hospital." My coffee grew cold as she continued. Jennifer's family lost their home to foreclosure last year. Her parents, Carol and James Stevens, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The medical bills from her pregnancy are already substantial. She's been classified as high risk due to gestational diabetes requiring specialist care. The pieces began forming a picture I didn't want to see. Marcus, my successful engineer's son, was actually working as a janitor at the same hospital where his child was being born. The shame of it, the pride that would prevent him from asking for help, suddenly made his behavior make more sense. I called Dr. Martinez, a colleague from my charity work at Phoenix Children's Hospital. She had contacts throughout the medical community and agreed to make some discreet inquiries. "Gabriella, the situation is more serious than you realize. Jennifer Thompson has been in and out of the hospital for the past 3 months. Her diabetes has caused complications that could affect the baby. The medical bills are approaching $43,000, and that's before delivery and any potential NICU care." My hands shook as I took notes. How much could this cost them total? If there are complications with the baby, easily 6 figures, maybe more. That afternoon, I drove past Marcus's apartment complex. The building looked tired, paint peeling from the trim, several windows covered with cardboard. This wasn't the life I had imagined for my son, the brilliant boy who had graduated summa cum laude with his engineering degree. Back in my hotel room, I went through my records and found something that made my heart ache. Over the past year, I had sent Marcus 3 checks, one for $5,000 when he mentioned car troubles, another for $8,000 when Jennifer needed dental work, a third for $12,000 around Christmas, thinking they might want to take a vacation or fix up their place. Every single check had been returned to me, unopened. I had assumed he was doing well financially and didn't need help. Now I understood it was pride, the same stubborn pride that had made him work 3 jobs to pay for college instead of accepting my offer to cover tuition. I called David Rodriguez, Marcus's former supervisor at Morrison Construction. David and I had met at Marcus's graduation party and stayed in touch occasionally. "Miss Thompson, I'm sorry about what happened to Marcus. The company had to let go 15% of staff, and even though Marcus was talented, he didn't have enough seniority. I wrote him a recommendation letter, but the market is tough right now. David, has Marcus been applying for other engineering positions?" "That's the thing, ma'am. He hasn't. I've reached out a few times about opportunities, but he always says he's not ready. I think the layoff really shook his confidence." As I hung up, my heart broke for my son. He was drowning in debt and shame, working a job far beneath his capabilities, while his wife was battling serious health complications. Instead of reaching out to family for support, they had chosen to push away the one person who could help them. But the biggest shock came when I called the hospital billing department directly, using my married name, Gabriella Williams Thompson, to inquire about payment plans for the Thompson family. "Ma'am, I show here that you're on our board of directors. Are you calling about the Thompson account in an official capacity?" I nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Gabriella Williams Thompson, you've been on our advisory board for children's services for 3 years. Your donations helped fund our new pediatric wing. In my grief, after my husband William's death, I had made substantial charitable contributions to various hospitals. Apparently, one of those donations had earned me a position I had forgotten about in my sorrow. The irony was devastating. My own son was struggling with medical bills at a hospital where I was a major donor, and neither of us had known about the other. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I researched Jennifer's medical condition further. Gestational diabetes with complications often led to babies with heart defects, breathing problems, or other issues requiring immediate intensive care. If their baby needed surgery or extended NICU care, the costs could easily reach $200,000 or more. Marcus wasn't just protecting his pride by keeping me away. He was terrified that I would discover the truth about his failures, his job loss, his inability to provide for his family during their greatest time of need. And Jennifer, raised by parents who had lost everything, was probably equally terrified of depending on anyone else. That second night in Denver, I couldn't stop thinking about the painful irony of the situation. My son was working as a janitor in a hospital where I served on the board of directors, struggling to pay bills while I had more money than I knew what to do with. How had we reached this point of complete disconnection? I spent the early morning hours going through my financial records, something I rarely did anymore since my accountant handled most of the details. The numbers were staggering, even to me. After William's death 7 years ago, his life insurance and investment portfolio had added another $2.8 million to my already substantial holdings. Desert Bloom Real Estate, the company I had built from nothing after Marcus's father abandoned us, was now worth just over $3 million. I own 12 properties across Arizona and Colorado, including a small office building in downtown Denver that I had purchased as an investment but never visited. The path to this wealth had been paved with 18-hour days, missed school events, and sacrifices that still haunted me. When Marcus was 5 and his father walked out, claiming he wasn't ready for family responsibilities, I had been left with a mortgage, a toddler, and a part-time job at a local real estate office. Those early years were brutal. I studied for my real estate license while Marcus slept, took him to client meetings when I couldn't find babysitters, lived on peanut butter sandwiches so I could afford his daycare. By the time he turned 10, I had my own small agency. When he graduated high school, I owned properties in 3 states. But success had come with a price. I had learned to be self-reliant, to never show weakness, to solve problems with money rather than emotion. Perhaps Marcus had inherited that same stubborn independence that made him return my checks unopened. I called my accountant, Robert Chen, in Phoenix. Robert, I need you to pull the records on any payments I've made related to Marcus Thompson over the past 5 years. Gabriella, are you sure? That might be painful to review. Just do it, please. An hour later, he called back with a list that made my chest tighten. Student loan payments totaling $47,000 made directly to the loan company without Marcus's knowledge. His car insurance, paid annually for the past 6 years. Health insurance premiums, when he was between jobs, covered through my business policy. A security deposit for his first apartment, paid to the landlord as a gift from an anonymous benefactor. I had been secretly supporting my son's independence, while he believed he was making it on his own. No wonder he felt he couldn't ask for help now. He didn't even know how much help he had already received. The hotel phone rang, startling me from my calculations. Miss Thompson, this is Robert Chen from University Hospital Billing. I apologize for calling so early, but I recognized your name from our donor records. Are you by any chance related to Marcus Thompson in our maternity ward? My breath caught. Yes, he's my son, ma'am. I had no idea. Your contributions to our pediatric cardiac unit have been extraordinary. The Williams-Thompson Heart Center has helped save dozens of children over the past 3 years. I had named the wing after my late husband, never thinking about how it would connect to my own family. Robert, what can you tell me about my son's situation? I probably shouldn't discuss this over the phone, but given your position on our board and your family connection, perhaps we could arrange a meeting? There are some complications with the baby that I think you should know about. That afternoon, I met with Robert Chen in the hospital's administrative offices. The view from the conference room overlooked the maternity ward where my grandson had been born just 24 hours earlier. Miss Thompson, your grandson was born with a condition called tetralogy of Fallot. It's a complex heart defect that will require surgery within the next few days. Dr. Martinez, our pediatric cardiac specialist, estimates the total cost could exceed $200,000. The air seemed to leave the room. Is he going to be okay? With proper treatment, absolutely. But the surgery must be performed at Children's Hospital, Colorado. It's one of the few facilities in the region equipped for this type of pediatric cardiac surgery. And my son doesn't know the full extent of the costs yet? Robert shook his head. We've been trying to prepare them gradually, but Mr. Thompson is already overwhelmed. He mentioned that he's been out of work and doesn't have adequate insurance coverage. I stared out the window at the Denver skyline, processing this information. My grandson needed heart surgery. My son was working as a janitor while drowning in medical debt. My daughter-in-law had painted me as a toxic presence in their lives, and I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. Robert, I want to establish an emergency fund for pediatric cardiac care, starting with my grandson's case. How quickly can we make this happen? His eyes widened. Miss Thompson, are you certain? We're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm certain. And I want it structured as a grant program, not charity. Families should maintain their dignity while getting the care their children need. As we began discussing the legal framework, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Gabriella, Mrs. Henderson, saw Jennifer at the grocery store yesterday. She looked terrible, said something about the baby needing special care. Are you okay? I typed back quickly. The baby has a heart condition. Surgery needed. They don't know I know. Her response was immediate. What are you going to do? I looked out at the hospital where my son was probably cleaning floors while his child lay in intensive care, where my daughter-in-law was recovering from a difficult delivery while facing financial ruin, where my first grandchild was fighting for his tiny life, in a building that bore my late husband's name. I'm going to remind them what family really means, I typed back. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of their crisis. The billing department had given me a picture of their medical costs, but there was more to discover. That evening, I used my business connections to learn about Marcus's employment situation, Jennifer's family background, and the web of financial problems they were hiding. The picture that emerged was devastating. Marcus was making $11 an hour as a hospital maintenance worker, afraid to use his real name on job applications because potential employers might discover his employment gap. Jennifer's family had not only lost their home, but also owed back taxes that prevented them from helping with any expenses. The young couple was drowning, and their pride was the anchor pulling them down. The call came at 3 in the morning on my second day in Denver. I had been lying awake anyway, staring at the hotel room ceiling and thinking about my grandson's heart condition, when the phone rang with the shrill urgency of middle-of-the-night bad news. Miss Thompson, this is Dr. Martinez from University Hospital. I'm calling because your grandson, William Marcus Thompson, has taken a turn for the worse. We need to transfer him to Children's Hospital Colorado immediately for emergency surgery. My hands shook as I fumbled for the lamp switch. How bad is it? The tetralogy of Fallot is more complex than we initially diagnosed. He's developed what we call a hypercyanotic spell, which means his oxygen levels are dangerously low. We have about 6 hours to get him into surgery, or we could lose him. I was dressed and driving through the empty Denver streets within 10 minutes. The city looked different at 3 in the morning, all shadows and streetlights, emergency vehicles cutting through intersections with their urgent warnings. At University Hospital, I parked illegally and ran through the lobby, my heart pounding harder than it had in years. The NICU was a different world, all beeping machines and soft lights, tiny babies fighting battles that seemed impossible for such small bodies. Through the glass window, I could see my grandson for the first time. William Marcus Thompson, named after my late husband and my son, was so much smaller than I had imagined. Tubes and wires surrounded his tiny form, monitors tracking every breath and heartbeat. Marcus stood beside the incubator, still wearing his maintenance uniform, one hand pressed against the glass, as if he could somehow transfer his own strength to his son. Jennifer was in a wheelchair next to him, an IV pole beside her, having insisted on being brought down from her room despite her own medical needs. I stayed in the hallway, watching my family face their crisis alone, my heart breaking for all of us. Jennifer's mother, Carol Stevens, arrived around 4 in the morning, followed by her sister Linda. They huddled together outside the NICU, whispering frantically about insurance coverage and payment plans. We could take out a second mortgage, Carol was saying, except we don't have a house anymore. What about that GoFundMe thing people do? Linda suggested. Maybe we could raise some money online. Marcus overheard and shook his head firmly. We're not begging for money on the internet. I'll figure something out. But I could see the defeat in his shoulders, the way he kept running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. He had no idea how he was going to figure anything out. The surgery, Dr. Martinez was describing, would cost more money than he could make in 5 years. Around 5 in the morning, the transport team arrived to move William to Children's Hospital, Colorado. The process was terrifying to watch, medical professionals moving with calm efficiency while my family fell apart. Jennifer started crying uncontrollably as they wheeled the incubator past her, reaching out to touch the plastic dome that protected her baby. "Is he going to die?" she kept asking. "Is my baby going to die?" Dr. Martinez knelt beside her wheelchair, her voice gentle but professional. "Jennifer, we have an excellent surgical team at Children's Hospital. Doctor, Rebecca Foster is one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in the country. But I need you to understand that this surgery will be expensive, and you'll need to speak with financial services about payment arrangements." Marcus's face went white. "How expensive?" "The surgery alone will be around $150,000. With the NICU stay and follow-up care, you're looking at potentially $300,000 total." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son's world crumble in real time, saw him calculate and recalculate numbers that would never add up to $300,000. Jennifer's family exchanged helpless glances, knowing they couldn't help. "Doctor," Carol said quietly, "what happens if they can't pay?" "The hospital will perform the surgery regardless. This is a life-threatening emergency. But the family will be responsible for the debt, and it will likely affect their credit and financial stability for years to come." As they prepared to transport William, Jennifer suddenly grabbed Marcus's hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry about your mother. I was wrong, Marcus. I was so wrong about everything." He squeezed her hand, tears streaming down his face. "It doesn't matter now, Jen. Nothing matters except William." But I could see it did matter. The weight of their decision to push me away was settling on them just as they faced the biggest crisis of their lives. They had cut off their only potential source of help because of pride and poisonous lies, and now their baby was fighting for his life while they faced financial ruin. The transport team wheeled William's incubator toward the exit, and I followed at a distance, my heart torn between wanting to rush to my family and knowing they had made it clear I wasn't welcome. In the parking garage, I watched them load my grandson into the ambulance, so tiny among all that medical equipment. Marcus rode in the ambulance while Jennifer was transported by another vehicle, still needing medical care herself. I followed the convoy through the morning traffic, keeping my distance but unable to stay away from my grandson's fight for survival. At Children's Hospital, Colorado, the cardiac unit was a maze of specialized equipment and highly trained professionals. I watched from the family waiting area as my son filled out insurance forms he knew wouldn't cover a fraction of the costs, as Jennifer's family made phone calls to relatives who had no money to offer. But the most heartbreaking moment came when I overheard Marcus on the phone with someone from the hospital's financial aid office. "I understand the options," he was saying, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Medical bankruptcy, payment plans, charity care applications. But my son is in surgery right now, and I can't think about anything except whether he's going to live." Through the window of the cardiac surgical unit, I could see the team preparing for William's operation. Dr. Foster, a woman about my age with steady hands and kind eyes, was reviewing the surgical plan with her team. They moved with confidence and precision, but I knew that all their skill meant nothing if my grandson's tiny heart couldn't handle the repair. In the surgical waiting room, Jennifer collapsed. Not emotionally, but physically. Her blood sugar levels spiked dangerously, a complication of her diabetes worsened by stress and insufficient post-delivery care. As paramedics worked to stabilize her, Marcus stood helplessly between his unconscious wife and the operating room where his son was fighting for life. "Sir, we need to take your wife to intensive care," one of the paramedics said. "Her condition is serious." Marcus looked around the waiting room wildly, as if searching for someone to tell him what to do. His in-laws were useless, crying and praying, but offering no practical help. Hospital staff moved efficiently around him, but he was drowning in decisions he wasn't equipped to make alone. That was when I stepped out of the shadows where I had been watching and walked toward my son. It was time to stop being a bystander in my own family's crisis. The moment I approached Marcus in that surgical waiting room, everything changed. He looked up at me with a mixture of shock, relief, and despair that broke what was left of my maternal heart. His maintenance uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in chairs, his face unshaven, his eyes red from crying and exhaustion. "Mom," he whispered, and for a moment he was 5 years old again, needing me to fix what was broken. "I'm here, honey," I said simply, placing my hand on his shoulder. I never left Denver. As the paramedics wheeled Jennifer toward the intensive care unit, I made a decision that would change all our lives. Instead of following the family drama, I turned toward the administrative offices of Children's Hospital Colorado. It was time to use the power I had spent decades building. "I need to speak with your chief financial officer immediately," I told the receptionist. "This is Gabriella Williams-Thompson, and it's regarding the baby Thompson cardiac surgery and a potential major donation." Within 15 minutes, I was sitting across from Janet Morrison, the hospital's CFO, in a conference room overlooking the Denver skyline. She had pulled my donor file and was studying it with obvious interest. "Miss Thompson, I see you've been a substantial contributor to pediatric cardiac care across multiple facilities. Your donation to Phoenix Children's Hospital helped establish their cardiac catheterization lab. Janet, I need to establish an emergency fund here, starting immediately. My grandson is in surgery right now, and my son's family is facing financial devastation. But this can't be seen as charity or family intervention. It needs to be structured as a legitimate medical grant program." She leaned forward, intrigued. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to create the William Marcus Thompson Heart Fund, named after my grandson and late husband. Initial funding of $500,000, designed to cover cardiac surgery costs for families who fall through the insurance gaps. My grandson's case would be the first recipient, but it needs to appear as if he qualified through normal channels." "Miss Thompson, are you certain about this level of commitment?" I opened my portfolio and laid out financial statements that made her eyes widen. "I'm worth more than $4 million, Janet. My late husband would have wanted his name associated with saving children's lives, and my son needs to maintain his dignity while getting the help his family requires." Over the next 2 hours, we worked with hospital legal counsel to structure the grant program. The beauty of it was that Marcus and Jennifer would apply for assistance like any other family, but the fund I was establishing would ensure they qualified immediately. "There's one condition," I added as we finalized the paperwork. "The family must agree to counseling services to address any underlying issues that might affect the child's long-term care and family stability." "That's actually standard for our grant recipients," Janet assured me. "Family counseling is part of our comprehensive care approach." While we worked on the legal documents, I made other calls. My investment advisor in Phoenix helped me liquidate some stock options to free up liquid cash. My attorney began drafting additional trust fund documents to ensure William would have medical coverage for any future heart-related needs throughout his childhood. But the most important call was to Dr. Foster, the pediatric cardiac surgeon who was operating on my grandson. "Doctor, this is Gabriella Thompson. I'm William's grandmother and a major donor to this hospital. Can you give me a realistic assessment of his condition?" Her voice was calm and professional. "Miss Thompson, the surgery is progressing well." The tetralogy of Fallot was complex. but we've successfully repaired the ventricular septal defect and relieved the pulmonary stenosis. Barring any unexpected complications, William should make a full recovery. The relief nearly buckled my knees. What's the long-term prognosis? With proper follow-up care and monitoring, he should live a completely normal life. Some children need additional procedures as they grow, but his particular case looks very promising. Doctor, his parents are facing significant financial stress. Is there any way to expedite the grant application process for the new heart fund I'm establishing? I think that can be arranged. Family stress significantly impacts recovery outcomes, so addressing the financial concerns quickly would actually be medically beneficial. By late afternoon, the grant paperwork was complete. Marcus and Jennifer would receive a call from Financial Services explaining that their family had been selected for the new cardiac care grant program, covering all costs related to William's surgery and follow-up care. They would never need to know that their benefactor was the grandmother they had rejected. But there was still the matter of Jennifer's deteriorating health and Marcus's employment situation. I couldn't fix everything with money alone. My son needed his confidence back, his career restored, and his marriage healed. Jennifer needed medical care and a serious reckoning with the lies she had told about me. As I walked back toward the surgical family waiting area, I encountered Carol Stevens, Jennifer's mother, crying in the hallway outside the ICU. "Mrs. Stevens," I said gently, "I'm Gabriella Thompson, Marcus's mother." She looked up with guilty, tear-filled eyes. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry about everything. Jennifer has been so stressed, and I think I made things worse by encouraging her to keep distance from your family." "Why did you do that, Carol?" She crumpled further. "Because I was jealous. Jennifer always talked about how successful you were, how you built your business from nothing, how you managed to raise Marcus alone and still become wealthy. We lost everything last year, and I felt like such a failure as a mother. It was easier to make you the villain than to face my own mistakes." The honesty was surprising and painful. "Carol, do you realize what your interference has cost everyone? My grandson nearly faced this crisis without the family support he deserved." "I know. Jennifer knows too now. She asked me to find you, to apologize, to see if there was any way to fix what we've broken." I looked through the window into the ICU, where Jennifer lay unconscious, IV tubes feeding medication into her body while her blood sugar stabilized. She looked so young and vulnerable, not like the manipulative woman who had poisoned my relationship with my son. "Mrs. Stevens, healing this family is going to require complete honesty from everyone, including Jennifer. Are you prepared for that?" She nodded eagerly. "Yes, anything. We just want William and Jennifer to be okay, and we want Marcus to have his mother back." As evening approached, Dr. Foster emerged from surgery with a tired smile. "The operation was successful. William is stable and recovering well. You can see him in about an hour." Marcus nearly collapsed with relief, and for the first time in days, I saw hope return to his face. But the real work was just beginning. My grandson was safe, but my family was still broken. The financial crisis was solved, but the emotional damage would take much longer to heal. That night, as I sat in the family lounge waiting for visiting hours, I began planning the next phase of my intervention. Marcus needed to know about the grant program without discovering my involvement. Jennifer needed to recover physically and face the consequences of her deceptions. And I needed to find a way back into my family's life without appearing to have bought my way in. The hardest part would be maintaining the illusion that the grant program was a coincidence while ensuring my son regained his dignity and his career. But I had spent 20 years building a business empire through careful strategy and patient planning. Rebuilding my family would require the same skills, but with much higher stakes. 3 days after William's successful surgery, the hospital's social worker, Linda Foster, called Marcus and Jennifer to a private conference room. Jennifer was finally stable enough to leave intensive care, though she still needed regular monitoring for her diabetes complications. I had positioned myself where I could observe, but not be seen, watching through the glass partition as my son and daughter-in-law prepared to learn some difficult truths. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Linda began, "we need to discuss your son's ongoing care and some financial matters that have come to our attention." Marcus straightened in his chair, preparing for more bad news about medical bills they couldn't pay. Jennifer reached for his hand, her face pale but determined. "First, the good news. Your family has been selected for a new grant program called the William Marcus Thompson Heart Fund. This will cover all costs related to your son's surgery, NICU care, and follow-up cardiac treatments through childhood." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus blinked several times, as if trying to process words that didn't make sense. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "All medical expenses related to William's heart condition will be covered. The grant program was just established by a donor who wished to honor family members with those names." Jennifer started crying, but these weren't tears of sorrow. "Are you telling us we don't owe $300,000? "That's correct. However, there are conditions attached to this grant. The donor has required that families receiving assistance participate in comprehensive counseling services to address any issues that might affect the child's long-term well-being." I watched Marcus's face cycle through disbelief, relief, and confusion. Who would do this? Why would someone help our family? Linda opened a folder and pulled out several documents. That brings me to the second matter we need to discuss. During our financial review process, we discovered some irregularities in your background that need to be addressed. My heart began racing. This wasn't part of the plan I had discussed with the hospital administration. "Mr. Thompson, you've been working in hospital maintenance under your full legal name, Marcus David Thompson. However, our review shows that you have an engineering degree from Colorado State University and 2 years of experience with Morrison Construction. Why are you working as a janitor when you're qualified for much better employment?" Marcus's shoulders sagged. "I lost my job 6 months ago. The company had layoffs, and I was let go. I couldn't find another engineering position, and we needed income, so I took what was available. But according to our employment verification, you haven't been actively seeking engineering work. Your former supervisor, David Rodriguez, says he's contacted you multiple times about opportunities, but you always decline." The pain in my son's eyes was unbearable to watch. "I failed, okay? I failed as an engineer, as a husband, as a provider. Jennifer deserves better than someone who can't even keep a decent job." Jennifer gripped his hand tighter. "Marcus, you didn't fail. The company had budget cuts. It wasn't your fault." Linda consulted her notes again. "There's more, Mr. Thompson. Our financial review uncovered some interesting information about assistance your family has been receiving. Over the past 5 years, someone has been paying your student loans, your car insurance, health insurance premiums, and several other expenses. Did you know about this?" I watched my son's face turn white as Linda continued. "The payments were made through various channels, but they all trace back to Desert Bloom Real Estate in Phoenix, Arizona. The owner of that company is listed as Gabriella Williams Thompson." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. "My mother," he whispered finally, "my mother has been paying my bills. For years, Mr. Thompson, without your knowledge, apparently." Jennifer covered her face with her hands. "Oh my God, Marcus, what have we done?" Linda placed another folder on the table. "Mrs. Thompson, We also need to address some concerns that arose during your treatment. Your social media accounts contain numerous posts disparaging your mother-in-law, including accusations of manipulation and boundary violations. However, our review of the actual facts suggests a different story. My daughter-in-law looked up with red, swollen eyes. What do you mean? Your mother-in-law has been a major donor to pediatric hospitals for years. She established cardiac care funds at facilities in 3 states. Her charitable giving focuses specifically on helping families who fall through insurance gaps, exactly like your situation. Does this sound like someone who is toxic or manipulative? Jennifer began shaking. No, it doesn't. It sounds like someone who cares about helping families. Linda opened the final folder, and I realized she had been more thorough in her investigation than I had anticipated. There's something else. Mrs. Thompson, your mother told hospital staff that she drove 10 hours from Phoenix to be here for your son's birth. She checked into a hotel 3 blocks away 2 days ago and has been staying there since you asked her to leave. She's still here? Marcus's voice cracked. She never left, Mr. Thompson. Despite being told she wasn't welcome, she stayed in Denver in case her family needed her. The conference room door opened, and I realized my moment of reckoning had arrived. Linda Foster had orchestrated this confrontation, and there was no avoiding it any longer. Mrs. Thompson, Linda said as I entered the room, I think it's time for your family to have an honest conversation. Marcus and Jennifer stared at me as if I were a ghost. I sat down across from them, my hands folded in my lap, trying to project calm while my heart hammered against my ribs. Mom, Marcus said quietly, how long have you been paying for my life? Since you graduated college, honey. Your father left us with nothing, and I promised myself you would never struggle the way we did. When you got that engineering job and seemed so proud of being independent, I found ways to help without damaging your confidence. Tears streamed down his face. All those years, I thought I was making it on my own. You were making it on your own. You earned your degree. You got that job through your own skills. You've been a good husband and father. I just made sure you didn't have to choose between paying student loans and buying groceries. Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. I said horrible things about you, and I was wrong about everything. Jennifer, why did you believe you needed to push me away? She looked at her hands, shame coloring her cheeks. My mother was jealous of your success. She kept saying you were trying to control our marriage, that you thought Marcus could do better than me. She convinced me that your generosity came with strings attached. And the social media posts? I wanted other people to think I was strong, that I could handle my own family without outside interference. I made you the villain to make myself feel like the hero. I'm so sorry. Marcus reached across the table toward me. Mom, I'm sorry too. I should have known better. I should have trusted you, should have asked for help when I lost my job. Marcus, why didn't you tell me about the layoff? Because I was ashamed. Because you raised me to be strong and independent, and I felt like I had let you down. I thought if I could just figure it out myself, prove that I could handle a crisis without running to my mother, that would somehow make me worthy of the man you raised me to be. I reached across and took both their hands. You are worthy, son. You both are. Family isn't about being perfect or never needing help. It's about being there for each other when life gets difficult. Linda cleared her throat gently. The hospital requires family counseling as part of the grant program. But based on what I'm seeing here, I think this family is already on the path to healing. As we sat in that conference room, my grandson recovering from heart surgery just floors above us, I felt something shift in the dynamics of our family. The lies had been exposed, the pride had been set aside, and the truth had created space for forgiveness. But there was still work to be done. Marcus needed help rebuilding his career. Jennifer needed to publicly correct the false narratives she had created, and we all needed to learn how to be a family again. 6 months later, I sat in the rocking chair I had finally assembled in William's nursery, holding my grandson while he slept peacefully against my chest. His tiny heart, now perfectly repaired, beat steadily beneath my palm. The room was decorated with photos spanning 4 generations. My parents, my late husband William, Marcus as a baby, and now this precious child who had brought our fractured family back together. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. The first family counseling session had been difficult, with old resentments and misunderstandings surfacing like infected wounds that needed to be cleaned before they could heal. But Dr. Patricia Barnes, our family therapist, had guided us through the process with patience and wisdom. Marcus had been the most resistant initially, struggling with the knowledge that his independence had been largely an illusion. "I feel like my whole adult life has been a lie," he had confessed during one particularly emotional session. "Marcus," Dr. Barnes had responded, "accepting help doesn't diminish your accomplishments. Your mother provided a safety net, but you still had to walk the tightrope. Every success you achieved was real." The breakthrough had come when Marcus finally understood that my secret support hadn't been about control or doubt in his abilities. It had been about love and the determination to spare him the crushing struggles I had faced as a young single mother. Jennifer's healing journey had been different, but equally important. She had publicly apologized on her social media accounts, posting a long, heartfelt message acknowledging her lies and asking forgiveness from our family and the community. The response had been overwhelmingly supportive, with many people sharing their own stories of family misunderstandings and reconciliation. "I was so insecure about my own family's failures that I couldn't see your generosity for what it was," she had written. Gabriella Thompson is one of the kindest, most selfless women I know, and I'm grateful she never gave up on us despite my mistakes. But perhaps the most significant change had been in Marcus's career. With my encouragement and financial backing, he had enrolled in a graduate engineering program specializing in renewable energy systems. The field was expanding rapidly in Colorado, and his combination of practical experience and advanced education had already attracted interest from several companies. "I never thought I'd be grateful for getting laid off," he had told me just last week, "but it forced me to stop settling for less than my potential." Jennifer had blossomed as well, once freed from the toxic influence of her mother's jealousy. Carol Stevens had been required to attend individual counseling as part of our family healing process, and she was slowly learning to address her own insecurities rather than projecting them onto our relationships. The diabetes complications that had nearly cost Jennifer her life had stabilized with proper medical care, covered by the comprehensive insurance plan I had arranged through my business. She had also discovered a talent for social media marketing, helping several small businesses in Denver build their online presence. "I want to use my experience with lies and manipulation for good instead of harm," she had laughed, showing me a successful campaign she had created for a local bakery. Today was special because we were celebrating William's first successful cardiac checkup since his surgery. Dr. Foster had pronounced him completely healthy, with no restrictions on his activities as he grew. The grateful tears in Marcus's eyes had reminded me why every sacrifice I had made over the past 25 years had been worth it. "Mom," Marcus said, appearing in the nursery doorway with Jennifer beside him, "we have something to tell you." I looked up from the rocking chair, noting the excited nervousness in their expressions. "What is it, honey?" Jennifer stepped forward, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We're pregnant again, and this time we want you involved from the very beginning." The joy that flooded through me was indescribable. I carefully stood up, still holding William, and embraced them both. "This is wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Healthy," Jennifer said firmly. "And grateful. And excited to do this right, with family support and honesty from day one." Over the following weeks, I found myself busier than I had been in years. I had temporarily relocated my business operations to Denver, working remotely while helping Marcus and Jennifer prepare for their growing family. The small office building I owned downtown had been converted into a satellite location for Desert Bloom real estate, giving me a legitimate reason to spend extended time in Colorado. Marcus was thriving in his graduate program, his confidence rebuilt, and his future bright. Several renewable energy companies had already approached him about internship opportunities, and one had hinted at a full-time position upon graduation. "I understand now why you kept your success quiet when I was growing up," he had told me recently. "You wanted me to find my own path, not feel overshadowed by your achievements." The wisdom that comes with age and experience had taught me that love sometimes means stepping back, allowing people to struggle and grow and discover their own strength. But it also means being ready to step forward when they truly need help, even if they're too proud to ask. The William Marcus Thompson Heart Fund had grown beyond our family's needs, helping dozens of other families facing similar crises. I had recruited other wealthy donors in Denver, and the program was being replicated at hospitals across the region. My grandson's medical crisis had become the catalyst for a charitable program that would help children for generations to come. On Sundays, we had established a family dinner tradition at Marcus and Jennifer's apartment. I cooked the meals, having rediscovered my joy in nurturing my family. Carol Stevens was gradually being included in these gatherings as she continued her own healing journey, and even Jennifer's father, James, had begun calling to check on his grandson's progress. "You know," Jennifer said to me one evening as we cleaned up after dinner, "I spent so much time trying to prove I didn't need a mother figure that I missed out on having one. Thank you for being patient while I figured that out." The relationship between us was still growing, still tentative in some ways, but built now on truth rather than misunderstanding. She had begun asking me for advice about business, about motherhood, about managing the challenges of marriage and family life. "The baby is due in March," she had announced at last Sunday's dinner. "We'd like to name her Gabriella if she's a girl, and David if he's a boy, after Mr. Bach." Rodriguez, who helped Marcus get back into engineering. The honor of having a grandchild named after me felt like the final healing of our broken relationships. But more than that, it represented hope for a future where our family could face challenges together, rather than being torn apart by pride and misunderstanding. As I rocked William to sleep each evening during my extended stay in Denver, I reflected on the lessons this crisis had taught us all. Sometimes the people who seem to have the most power are actually the most vulnerable. Sometimes those who appear to need the least help are drowning silently. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is not solving all their problems, but being present when they're ready to accept help. The phone call about the unpaid hospital bill had been the catalyst for healing our family, but it had taken courage from all of us to rebuild trust and understanding. Marcus had to swallow his pride and accept help. Jennifer had to acknowledge her mistakes and change her behavior. And I had to balance my desire to fix everything with the wisdom to let them maintain their dignity. Now, as I prepared to return to Phoenix for a few weeks to handle some business matters, I felt confident that our family bonds were strong enough to withstand the test of distance. We had learned to communicate honestly, to ask for help when needed, and to offer support without judgment. "I love you, sweet William," I whispered to my sleeping grandson. Your mama and daddy learned some hard lessons to make sure you'll grow up in a family that knows how to love each other well. The future stretched ahead of us, bright with possibility. Marcus would finish his graduate program and begin his new career. Jennifer would welcome their second child, surrounded by family support. And I would continue building my legacy, not just in business success, but in the lives of the grandchildren who would carry our family's values into the next generation. The greatest wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or real estate holdings. It's measured in relationships restored, trust rebuilt, and love that survives even our worst mistakes. My family had discovered that truth through crisis and emerged stronger because of it. As I turned off the nursery light and headed back to my hotel for the last time, I smiled, thinking about the conversation that had started this whole journey. A billing department calling about an unpaid hospital bill. My response had been simple: I'll take care of it. But the real work hadn't been about money at all. It had been about taking care of my family and learning to let them take care of me in return. That's what family really means. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but care. Not pride, but love that's strong enough to admit when we're wrong and brave enough to try again. As I looked back at William's nursery window one more time, I whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances and the grace that makes healing possible. Tomorrow I would return to Phoenix, but I was no longer the same woman who had driven away from University Hospital in tears just 6 months ago. I was a grandmother, a mother-in-law, and a mother who had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply being invited back into the lives of the people you love most. And that, I thought, as I drove through the Denver night toward my hotel, is worth more than all the money in the world. What would you do if you discovered that someone you'd pushed away was secretly supporting your family all along? Have you ever had to choose between pride and accepting help when you needed it most? Share your thoughts in the comments below about family relationships, forgiveness, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about families overcoming challenges together. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that love often means being there even when you're not wanted, and that the strongest families are those who learn to heal from their mistakes. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me, and may you always have the courage to rebuild bridges that matter most.